Hello everyone, and welcome to our third lecture in Chapter 12. In this lecture, we're going to take a look at the Mongol Empire, get a little bit more into its specifics, um, and kind of go further than just on like how and why it was able to expand so far, and then kind of talk about what happened after Genghis Khan died, and eventually what led to the fall of the empire itself. All right, so let's get started. All right, so one of the most influential figures within the Mongol Empire outside of Genghis Khan is one of his grandsons, Kublai Khan. Now, Kublai Khan, when the Mongol Empire split up into the four Khanates, he controlled the Khanate of the Great Khan, which essentially was the Khanate that controlled the original area of Mongolia, so the Mongolian homeland, and then China. So in 1279, there's an important Mongol victory over the Chinese. They're able to conquer all of China in 1279 under Kublai Khan. So Kublai Khan, when he takes China, he actually does a few things. One is he moves the seat of power within the Khanate of the Great Khan to China, specifically to Beijing. Beijing's in northern China. It's more of a centralized location within that Khanate. Plus, you got to remember too, China obviously population-wise outnumbers the Mongols greatly. So having a control base or your base of power in China is going to be much more effective to control this area. And in Chinese history, this is when the Yuan dynasty is founded. So the Yuan dynasty is actually the controlling time of the Mongols. So when Kublai Khan is able to take control of China, it unites the whole country. It opens up China to foreign trade and contact, because think about the Mongolian Empire as a whole, across all four Khanates, plus their connections now that they have with the sea, with China and so forth. So there's opening up of contact for China. So that's a huge positive for this region, is the Mongols actually bring in outside contact for pretty much any means, culturally, economically, and so forth. Now, there's very few changes that are made under the Mongols here to the Chinese culture and government, primarily because, think about what we talked about in the last lecture, the Mongols, they pretty much let people control and stay the way, stay under the traditions and stuff that they had, as long as they paid tribute, as long as they worked within the Mongol system. All right, so here's Kublai Khan's empire. Now, this is obviously including all of the four Khanates, with the Yuan dynasty being the main focus here for him in the Khanate of the Great Khan. All right, so now it's not all positives here for the Mongolian Empire under Kublai Khan. One of his main goals was actually to move over to take Japan from kind of his bases in China and Korea. The Mongols attempt two invasions, one in 1274 and the other one in 1281, to get to Japan and take it over. And one thing that they do in particular is they use the Koreans to supply them with ships. Because the Mongols, they're not a naval-based people. The Koreans have connections with that. They do have a little bit of a history of being trading with ships and building ships. So they force the Koreans that they take over to build them invasion fleets. Now, both are obviously unsuccessful. The second invasion is actually going to be the largest naval invasion in the history of warfare up until World War II. So think about that. So it's over 700 years. It's going to be until an invasion force is built up larger than what the Mongols are able to put together in the second invasion of Japan. Now, this is where we get the word kamikaze from, or the idea of the divine wind, because the invasion force is damaged beyond its ability to actually fully attack Japan by this divine wind that comes up, stirs up brutal, violent tidal waves and so forth, and damages a significant portion of the Mongol fleet. Here's some art from Japan at the time depicting warfare between the Japanese and Mongol warriors uh, in these invasions. We'll see this. I think we'll see this piece of art a little bit later in the next lecture when we talk specifically about Japan. So we'll kind of talk about these events between Japan and the Mongols a couple of times here. All right, so uh, when talking about the Mongolian Empire, you have to specifically talk about their rule in China because it's such a significant portion of the Mongol area of control. But also, too, think about it, it's the first time that China's come under control of a foreign power. So you have to talk about that in its significant ways too. And we've kind of talked about some of these traits already that the Mongols possessed in allowing people to kind of keep their traditions in control as long as they focused within the Mongol way of life. Now, in China, they do some things a little bit differently, not completely differently, just a little bit. So you have to recognize two problems that the Mongols have to deal with in China. One is they're nomadic. So you're going from a nomadic group of people or people that are used to some form of nomadic way of life into a more sophisticated sedentary society. So they have to kind of deal with that issue. And then secondly, and perhaps more importantly, as things happen over time, there's very few Mongols compared to the number of Chinese. So how are you going to rule over a population that is much, much bigger than you? So here's some things that take place. The Mongols actually live completely separately from the Chinese and follow different laws. So that's going to be a point of contention moving forward. Okay, you have populations living under completely different laws and in completely different area. We see that all throughout history, even today, where you have populations that are living separately, following different laws, or even just feeling like the laws are treating them different. You have issues. Secondly, and this is actually probably more important for the Mongols themselves in effectively running a more sophisticated society, is that they appoint foreigners, whether it's Chinese or people from other areas throughout the Mongolian Empire. They appoint foreigners in higher office positions within the government. And the reason why they do this is because they know that those people don't have loyalties to that specific area. And that's important in making a clear cut objective decision, and that allows them to rule a lot more effectively. Okay, another thing that they are able to do during this period is the Grand Canal is extended north to Beijing, and this is a very important trading um, uh, advancement for the Mongol rule in China, and then it's going to be a huge advancement moving forward for the subsequent Chinese dynasties as we go along. Okay, now we're going to have to talk about trade here with the Mongols. We talked a little bit about it in terms of the Pax Mongolica. Now we're actually going to talk about some specifics that are brought about because of the Pax Mongolica period of trade and openness really between the Mongol Empire from all the way from China all the way to Europe and so forth. So you have an opening of this trade. You're seeing things like porcelain, silks, and gunpowder traded. You're seeing new inventions like we talked about in the first lecture in this chapter, like the compass and so forth, being developed to being used much more effectively and allowing for things to take off. But Kublai Khan, we've already mentioned how the Mongols opened up China, and and one of the main reasons why they're able to do that, outside of the fact that now you have an empire that's connecting from one area to the other, but you actually have a ruler in Kublai Khan who invites foreign merchants. He wanted outsiders to come in for a variety of reasons, to show off power, to get access to their knowledge and goods, and so forth. So Marco Polo is perhaps the most famous of all these travelers that take up this invitation of Kublai Khan wanting foreign merchants within the empire. Now he's going to serve Kublai Khan for about 17 years on various numbers of government missions, um, going throughout his empire and doing certain tasks. Now, all the time, Marco Polo is writing about his experiences in China, and on his way back from China, he's actually taken prisoner by a Genovese trading ship, and he further writes about his travels. And this is kind of where he puts everything down and kind of coordinates everything. And it's why Marco Polo is a significant person that we talk about today in history, the history books, is because of these writings that he's able to put together about his time in China, as well as his travels there and back. Sorry for the poor quality here of this map, but this is a map showing you of Marco Polo's travels to China and then on the way back to Venice, where he's from. All right, so we're going to talk about the end of Mongol rule. So I've mentioned this probably already 5 or 6 times in various different examples across different cultures, is that when you have a great leader, generally when they die or their reign ends for whatever reason, the empire takes a step back. Now, this can't be any more true for what happens with the Mongols when Kublai Khan dies. They've had some very strong leaders. Obviously, Genghis Khan and Kublai Khan are the 2 most important ones. But when he dies, you start to see the cracks in the Mongolian Empire start to widen almost immediately. And mainly it's because you have the Mongols are overextended and just fighting continuous wars, and the spending that's going on with that, in the plunder they're taking and overtaxing of the populations across the empire, mean that people are getting fed up. So where this really starts is in Southeast Asia, as the Mongols push into what we would consider like present-day Vietnam and Laos. They suffer a humiliating series of defeats. And that's important because that shows that the Mongol armies can be defeated. So that's a step in the right direction for their enemies, saying, look, we can defeat these guys militarily. And then you add in that the animosity that people are just having to, whether it's they're fighting all the time or that they're having to work on all these highly laborious projects like extending the Grand Canal, or the fact that they're being overtaxed for a variety of reasons, means that they're fed up. So the Yuan dynasty, in the years after Kublai Khan's death, they changed hands of leadership 4 times in 8 years. I mean, think about that. I mean, today we live in a democracy. We have presidential election every 4 years, and that president can't serve more than 2 terms. But think about if the president were to come into office, pass away or be impeached or have to resign, and then have the vice president would have to take over after 2 years, and then you'd have another election, and then you have a new president, and then the same thing happens again. It'd be really, really chaotic. So in this day and age, and it's even more so then, because it's not like you can easily control or have an understanding of what's going on across a wider scope of area immediately like we do today. One of the reasons for why the Mongol power actually fell apart quite a bit was the fact of, like we talked about, those overtaxations. Well, the Summer Palace was one of the things that were built under Mongol rule that was built using the taxes from the Mongols taxing the people so much. And this is a lavish palace network to show off the power and strength of the Mongol Empire in China under Kublai Khan. And it's very beautiful. You can go visit parts of it today still, but it's just an example of kind of the lavish lifestyle the Mongols were exacting or living, and then using the Chinese people to exact that. All right, so we have the end of Mongol rule in China. So as we go into the 1300s, there's rebellions that kind of spring up all across China, from resentment and humiliation over taxation, famines, floods, disease, any problem you could think of, anything you can think of, name it, and that is why these people in China rebel against Mongol rule. So what happens is in 1368, the Yuan dynasty is overthrown by the Ming dynasty. And this is going to start a new dynasty that's going to last quite a while in China. We'll talk about the Ming later on in this course when we get into chapter 19. But furthermore, in terms of Mongol rule in other places, because remember, there's 4 Khanates. you start to see the other Khanates fall. The Ilkhanate falls. Pretty much what happens is as the people, the Mongols there, come into contact with society and start to convert to Islam. They're so few in number, and for a variety of other reasons that we can't get into for this course, they pretty much kind of just melt in with the population, kind of similar to what happens with the Vikings in Europe. In Central Asia in the 1370s, the Chagatai Khanate is going to last a little bit longer than that of the Khanate of the Great Khan or the Yuan dynasty. It disintegrates in Central Asia for a variety of reasons as well. And then we have the Golden Horde. They're going to be the last of the Mongol Khanates to fall, and it will fall in when they eventually leave Russia. So they're going to be the last ones to kind of hold on to the old vestiges of the Mongolian Empire. All right, and that's all I've got for you today. We'll kind of venture and talk a little bit about the Mongol Empire in the next lecture. And we'll mention some things about the Mongols later on, but after that, that's kind of where we're going to leave with them. Very, very influential group of people you guys need to remember. Please make sure that you go back and look at how and why the Mongol Empire spread so quickly and over a vast area. And then also make sure you look at in terms of how did they actually maintain rule and what were the benefits and disadvantages of their rule in the areas that they came to control. As for that, I'll see you guys later. Have a good one.